Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Ala Paredes. I'm 38 years old, based in Sydney. So as mentioned earlier, I'm a freelance writer and also an English language teacher and a visual artist. I have moderate to severe sensory neural hearing loss in both ears, and I need a hearing aid. I should be wearing it more often, but I wear it mostly in crowded places. So I grew up in the Philippines, and hearing loss actually runs in my family on my mother's side. But I did not know this because it was never spoken of. It was never spoken of even when three of my uncles wore hearing aids. And as far as I knew, there was only one deaf person in my family. My uncle Jigs, my mom's eldest brother, he was born profoundly deaf due to complications with hydrocephaly as a baby. And the way I see it, because Uncle Jigs was profoundly deaf, I feel like my grandparents had such a hard time dealing with having a deaf son that they didn't really bother with the other kids who had hearing loss. So for those uncles of mine, those three uncles with hearing loss, growing up with a deaf brother, I mean, partial loss must have seemed like a trifle in the family. It was not made out to be a big deal. And so there are actually two kinds of deafness in my family. So we have the genetic sensory neural hearing loss, which three of my uncles have. And we have my uncle Jigs, who is completely deaf due to hydrocephaly as a baby. Right? So three uncles with hearing aids should have seemed like a warning sign, right? But I was never screened for hearing loss. Nobody looked out for the signs. And so I was absolutely floored when I was diagnosed with hearing loss at age 19, and even more shocked to hear that it was genetic, that it ran in the family. I was like, what? You know? Um, but at the same time, it made perfect sense. All my friends knew me to be like a space cadet, always floating around in space. A friend once commented that I was a conversation starter, not an ender. I could begin conversations, but I would trail off. My concentration was very poor. I always knew that something was not right. I couldn't concentrate in class. Whenever the teacher would call me to answer, I'd be like, what? I never knew what was going on, but I would score highly in my tests, because when I studied on my own, I did fine. I found it really, really difficult to sit down and listen to someone talking for a long time. And I still do, even at my age. So, anyway, back to my family. So, clearly, all these years, it had been the deaf elephant in the room that was never talked about, never acknowledged. And even after I was diagnosed with it, it still wasn't discussed. It was like, okay, I have hearing loss. Everyone else had a lot of other people in my family have it too. So now what? It's not like everyone banded together to support me or anything. That didn't happen. And so I ignored the problem. I thought I'd just live with it like my mother, like my uncles. And I didn't really consider it a significant problem then. And it didn't really fit in with my personal narrative at that time, how I viewed myself to be. I was only 19 years old. This was 20 years ago, mind you. And back then in the Philippines, I was a model and I was a TV presenter. So, a very glamorous career. And being hard of hearing did not fit in with that. So I got away with it for a long time, just kind of guessing my way through social situations. So people with hearing loss are exceptional at pretending that they know what's going on. We know all the social cues, when to laugh, when to nod, when we're having conversations with people, even though we don't really know what's happening 100%. And I even excelled at the sort of careers where you would never suspect I had hearing loss. So I mentioned I was a television host. I was interviewing people on camera with my hearing loss. How did I manage to do that? I don't know. When I moved to Australia, I worked in hospitality, taking orders, I sang in a band. I was really good at faking it until my late 20s when my hearing began to deteriorate even more. And I really began to feel the way it limited my life. And it really hurt me whenever people would dismiss me in a conversation. You know, that thing when you ask people to repeat themselves and they say, nah, never mind. You know, it's like they get tired of talking to you. It would hurt when they would laugh at me when I didn't hear the right thing. Um, like I knew I wasn't stupid, but I worried that people would think that I was stupid. And also, people thought it was acceptable to make fun of it. And because of that, I felt pressure to appear normal, even though I knew I wasn't normal. And I began to feel really insecure about my future job prospects. I knew I couldn't work in hospitality for much longer. And I lost belief in myself. And even then, I didn't really think the hearing loss was responsible for it. Somehow I just thought I was defective somehow. Something was wrong with me. And I was very depressed towards my late 20s. I eventually caved in and got hearing aids, and they did help. But I was still very insecure knowing that I had hearing loss. I was terrified that I might forget to take the hearing aids to work with me. I would have panic attacks thinking about going to work without the hearing aids. I was a teacher already by then. I was an English language teacher. But what changed things was I was at work one day in the staff room with all the other teachers, and I asked my boss to please repeat something that he just said because I didn't catch it. And he started going, huh? What? You know, he was making fun of me. He was pretending to be hard of hearing. He was going, what? And usually I let it slide. But that time, I think I began to get a bit upset and people could see it. And my coworker noticed this and she stood up. She cut in and she went straight to my boss and she said, that wasn't very nice. And everyone in the room fell silent. She had just told the boss off. And my boss went red and he walked out of the room. And I was just like, wow, somebody stood up for me. I didn't think that my disability mattered enough for anyone to stand up for me. It was a really big moment, you know. And my boss apologized to me very sincerely after. I think it was a big realization for him. I think that a lot of people think it's funny to make fun of people who can't hear properly, and I think a lot of people feel that way because the disability has never really been humanized. It's always the subject of jokes. It's associated with growing old, and it's not taken seriously. So I decided to write about it, to give it a human voice. So I eventually wrote an article for SBS and eventually ABC. I can show you the article maybe at the end of my talk. Yeah, just very quickly. And when I published those articles about, you know, living with hearing loss, I discovered that it was more common than I thought it was. You know, I was not alone. There were like so many young people out there who had hearing loss. I found a community of sufferers, and it's really affirming to hear that they have the same fears and anxieties that I do. The fear of your hearing aid breaking at the crucial moment, you know, the fear of not being able to get work. And I also learned that even mild hearing loss has really significant effects. Like it's linked to memory loss, low self-esteem and anxiety, higher rates higher rates of unemployment and a higher risk of dementia in old age. And at the heart of it, hearing loss is a communication problem. It's not really more than a hearing problem, it's a communication problem. And a great thinker named Marshall McLuhan, he once said, okay, this is a really important quote to me. He said, the quality of your communication is the quality of your life. So I'll say that again. The quality of your communication is equal to the quality of your life. And these are words that I take to heart to remind myself why I mustn't let my hearing loss prevent me from living. And I decided that it was up to me to reach out to people and teach them how to communicate with me, because they didn't know how. They don't know how to communicate with people who have hearing loss. And it was up to me to teach them. And to do this, I would have to openly identify as a person with hearing loss and really make it visible by talking about it and writing about it. And this took an enormous leap of courage. it still feels very vulnerable to let people know about it. But it's either I do it, I come out with it, or I fade away and I stop, and I lose the courage to reach out and connect with people. And so far, it's really paid off. I tell all my coworkers and all my English language students as well about my hearing loss. And I'm surprised at how accepting and considerate people can be when I make myself vulnerable and tell them about it. It's also really helped my family realize that we are in fact a hearing loss family. We're a hearing loss family, which explains a lot of the way we behave and miscommunicate. In fact, my mom eventually went in for a hearing test and discovered that her hearing was even worse than mine. And just today, before I went online, she told me that my grandfather and his sisters all had hearing loss as well. Go figure. So that makes 4 uncles, my mom and me, and my grandfather, hopefully not my children. But if they do have it, I want to prepare them. I want them to be better prepared. I want them to have more knowledge and information, more support than I did, and to not let it stop them from being whatever they want to be. So I hope they carry it with more confidence from the very beginning than I did. And that's the end of my story. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.